Hi, I'm Emily and welcome back to this week's News Bytes. This week, as you can tell, the setting has changed a bit, but it's only temporary. So instead of having my sad gardenia in the background, just missing, I have brought a peace lily as a temporary guest as well. So anyway, let's get on to the newsletter. This week's newsletter is called Leadership Training 101, and it is on John chapter 13, verses 1 through 35. From Eliyahu. Shalom, friends. Born in America, I've seen a lot over the decades. In the 60s, we had Cold War with the Russians, hot war with Vietnam, feminism became a thing, and the sexual revolution of so-called free love and gay pride rocked the cultural divide. Don't forget LSD and pot, of course. Civil rights came to the fore. 3 major political assassinations shocked the country. President Kennedy and his brother Bobby were assassinated, as was Martin Luther King. Yes, and somewhere in there a man walked on the moon. It was a crazy and wild decade, but still, for the people I knew, everybody got along pretty well. At the time, I never would have believed that the 60s would become the good old days. At least the 60s included a message of peace and love, and a sense of humor. The 2010s, not so much. Am I saying the 2010s have been worse than the 1960s? I certainly am. For all the wild times, there was no general consensus of any major segment of American society for a civil war back then. Certainly no major news sources ever entertained such an absurd idea, or even mentioned it. Not so in the 2010s. The division and even hatred between cultural blocs that has been stirred up in this decade makes any kind of meaningful compromise impossible. Also, spiritual brothers and sisters accepted, I've not heard much about peace and love in any form that makes sense lately, and a lot of people are just too sensitive about everything to allow for a good laugh about anything. We are all aware of division and hatred in countries around the world. However, many think of America as the foundation of stability in the world, which is why I'm focusing on America here. The hatred and division in America has become so great in the 21st century that even well-known news sources repeatedly speculate on the possibility of civil war. This began to get particularly nasty during the 2016 election news cycle and has only intensified since then. Here are a few examples of this civil war talk in the news. What are the chances of a second American Civil War? Quote, last time out in early March when we discussed this, the consensus number for national security experts was at about 30%, with some outliers at 60% and even 95%. This was from the Foreign Policy in June 18, 2017. Another headline is Stop Making American Civil War Clickbait. And in America, talk turns to something not spoken of for 150 years, Civil War. Another headline is America heading for another civil war? Why Trump, facing impeachment, warns of civil war? And look at this. How close is the U.S. to civil war? About 2/3 of the way, Americans say. Intelligencer, October 24th, 2019, quote, a majority of Americans, no matter where they live or the party they typically vote for, think the country is growing apart. On political, racial, and class lines, Americans think divisions are widening, according to a new Georgetown University poll. The division is leading to a dark place, respondents said. Asked how close the country is to the edge of a civil war, with 0 being not close at all and 100 being time to get the go bag, Americans say we're at 67.23, so 2/3 of the way to internecine bloodshed, end quote. According to the sources above, in 2017, the consensus was that the odds of an actual civil war in America stood at 30%. Now, on the verge of 2020, we are told the odds of a civil war in America stand at a whopping 67%. Of course, those figures refer to an actual shooting war. The Heritage Foundation and some other credible sources say that America is in a cold civil war already and have been for a while, needing only a spark in the tinder to go from cold to hot. When neighbors are thinking of literally going to war with one another, it is pretty clear they have little or no love for one another. To paraphrase Bible prophecy, because lawlessness is increased, most people's love has grown cold. By every measure, this cooling off of love of neighbor will only get worse, of course. What a contrast this is with the words of Messiah. By this, all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. That's John chapter 13, 35. This may be the biggest challenge followers of Messiah face in these times, to continue to walk in love for others when the world around us is bristling with hostility. Messiah's love is equal to this challenge. Let's let his love flow through us, and it will attract those who don't belong to this world. And how true that is. In this same chapter, I actually had a field example with these verses, which is probably going to be uploaded to our other channel, Tsiyon Tabernacle channel, sometime in the future. So maybe you could subscribe and, take a look at it when it comes out. I would appreciate that. But getting back to the newsletter, in this same chapter of John, Yeshua washed the feet of Judas, and he knew Judas was going to betray him. And in the same chapter, like we read, Yeshua said, love one another as I have loved you. And we know that he laid his life down for those he loved, for his people, which he loved. And this is likely one of the hardest things that we've been commanded to do, is to love one another as he loved us. Because it's just not an easy thing to choose to love other people, especially when people disagree on so much as they do in today's world. Like you will not always agree with your brother or sister about everything. And I don't just mean we should all be in accord with one another when it comes to following Messiah and Messiah being the focus of our life. However, there's things like silly things, politics, or just the way you grew up, cultural differences, or they might remind you of someone you don't like, so you might not get along with them. And that's just kind of how life is. But the best thing you can do is follow Yeshua's example and love them. And we can't love one another, though, as he loved us, without being directly connected to him and having his love coming to us so that we can give and share that same love. And it is by this love that the world will see his glory in us and know that we're different. And then his people will be attracted to that because it won't be like the world. Just like in the first century, people knew Yeshua was different. Those who he called out, they could see that difference. He was different than the Pharisees. He was different than all the rabbis and teachers. So people will see this love and know that we belong to him. And it's like the verse in every newsletter, if you've noticed, is Isaiah 61:2. Arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of Yahweh is risen on you. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and gross darkness the peoples. But Yahweh will arise on you, and his glory shall be seen on you. And that's what we need to be, a light. And like this newsletter is called Leadership Training 101, to be a leader, you have to have this same love. And being disciples of Yeshua, we're all called to lead in some way, because we're supposed to be looking for those who are his. Tsiyon.net, we actually have a leadership training thing, and it goes along with the Sukkot presentation last year. And if you're a partner, you can watch that and actually look into leadership of the kingdom. And if that interests you, I would highly suggest you going to Tsiyon.net and taking a look at that. Of course, you need to be a Tsiyon partner and be completely serious about leading his people and being a good shepherd and putting his people before yourself and serving others, not just power or whatever. But anyways, if you like this newsletter and you like this video, hit the like button, leave your comments below, subscribe, and watch the video that goes along with this newsletter. Thank you for joining me.